Hello and welcome to today's HDI webinar. We are excited that you are joining us today for ITSM and the value of knowledge-centered service for the enterprise. HDI, Smarter Service, Better Business. I'm Andrew Gillum, Associate Analyst at HDI, and I have a few housekeeping announcements before we begin. If you experience any technical problems, please refresh your browser. I encourage you to ask questions at any time during our discussion. Click on the Q&A tab in your BrightTalk window and we'll answer as many questions as we can during today's panel. Today's discussion will be available on demand shortly after the completion of this live event. You will receive an email reminder once it becomes available. And finally, thank you to Team Dynamics for sponsoring today's panel. I'm excited to introduce our speakers today. Kaylee Averdick is a knowledge-centered service specialist, having spent 8 years with Western Kentucky University running their knowledge management strategy. She can offer best practices and key tips and tricks for creating a solid knowledge base that drives self-service adoption. Kaylee is currently a sales engineer with Team Dynamics and works with customers across both the private and public sector to help ideate best practice uses for ITSM. And Kaylee, I understand you have a few words that you wanted to say on behalf of your company.
Yes, thank you so much, Andrew. We are so pleased to be sponsoring this webinar on KCS. Not only is KCS very dear to my heart, KCS can be a huge boost to any IT support team, especially right now. And with KCS, you can quickly enrich your knowledge base and easily keep it relevant. And we're going to be discussing how to make KCS a reality today.
I'm really excited for it. And joining us to help make that KCS reality, we have some experienced KCS practitioners. Katerina Weimar heads the ITS Project Management Office at the University of South Dakota. She has over 10 years of project management experience and has worked in higher education and banking operations environments. She holds knowledge-centered service certifications from HDI, including KCS Fundamentals and KCS Principles, customer support and ITIL certifications, and was the project manager for the KCS implementation at the University of South Dakota. And we're also joined by Paula Cottrell. She's the knowledge manager at the University of South Dakota. Paula has 25 years of IT experience, including 11 years in higher education, where she has also served as a help desk agent and help desk team lead. Paula's career has been primarily focused on customer service, service management, service desk operations, and knowledge management. Paula holds HDI certifications in Support Center Analyst, Support Center Team Lead, Technical Support Professional, KCS Fundamentals, and KCS Principles. She also holds ITIL, CompTIA, Windows MCP, and Apple ACMT certifications. Thank you so much to all of the panelists for joining us today. I'm really excited for this discussion. So I want to get started. Paula, just tell us a little bit about what the state of knowledge management was like at the University of South Dakota before you implemented KCS, and why was what you were doing before not good enough, or what did you want to improve?
So before we had KCS, we didn't have a knowledge base or really knowledge management of any sort. We had different information kind of all over the place. We had wiki pages, information siloed into team-specific SharePoints, old ticket notes, employees with their own knowledge normally that was saved locally on their computers. So it was really kind of all over the place. In moving to KCS, we did actually choose not to move any of that legacy data over. Our agents actually created articles as customer requests came in because it was important to use that customer content, just kind of making it easier for the customers to find that information once it was in the knowledge base. So the rule that we followed for that legacy data is that we could link any of the articles to it if the information didn't change, and then actually create a new article if that legacy data did change. So kind of the why it wasn't good enough is definitely because that information was really all over the place and we needed to get it in one central location, both for IT and for our customers.
I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. And so one of the interesting things about KCS is that you don't always need to migrate that legacy knowledge, and it takes a non-proactive approach. It's reactive. And having worked with Kaylee as a knowledge coach before, I know that you used to get on me for trying to do things too proactively. Tell us why that doesn't always work the best for knowledge management.
Well, to be quite frank, it's really a waste of time. So the knowledge that you need is by demand from your customers. One of the best ways that I can describe this is to tell a little story of past mistakes that I've made. Years ago at my university, we were moving from one email system to another for our students. And I remember this IT committee getting around and thinking, or what are all of the things that we need to put into an FAQ to tell these students? And so it was a group of people who were not students who were deciding the questions that they were going to ask. And I remember having to write up documentation of how to add the email to a BlackBerry. And thinking to myself, this is never, ever going to be used. But the committee wanted to get all the information that they could possibly have out there for every device and so on and so forth. And really, it's a time waster because you're guessing at what they're going to need versus the first time you're asked that, capturing that, documenting, and then you know that there was a demand for it.
That's a great explanation. Thank you. So you had the opportunity, Kaylee, to speak to a lot of customers who are in the early and kind of immature stages of knowledge management. Besides just having knowledge all over the place, what are the other pain points that are kind of common for them?
So I would echo that the number one reason that the number one pain point that I see most frequently is disparate content. And what really that causes is you don't have a great workflow in place for your frontline responders when it comes to the workflow of supporting their end users. So I like to call it giving your end users, or you're giving your technicians ammo. So when you're thinking about being that technician that's on that front line, you need that ammo in order to provide your top-notch customer service. And a huge pain point is, okay, well, we may have someone who has a cubicle in the corner that knows a lot about Apple Mail, and we might have somebody who's down the hall that knows a lot about this one system, and then we might have sticky notes and a dry erase board. And what that causes is not only is that information disparate, but you don't have a really great workflow. So what we typically see when I'm talking to individuals looking for a new ITSM software is they say, well, okay, well, we do have it all in this one system, but then they have to log into that and go to a separate window, and they can't do that all within their one kind of workflow from starting that interaction with the customer to solving that issue for that customer.
And of course, you know, whenever you get the call on that obscure system, whoever knows, like, is the expert in that, they're always at lunch. It always, you get that call when someone's at lunch. So, Paula, I'm curious, when did you officially begin adopting KCS, and what are your accomplishments so far? Tell us a little bit more about your story.
So there are kind of a few key dates that I kind of want to point out for our KCS journey. In 2015 and 2016, we had initiatives where we brought in someone to actually help us work with our customers to identify our needs. And then in 2016, we did decide that KCS is going to be the methodology that we adopted. It wasn't until the fall of 2017, we actually had HDI come in and train most of our employees. We actually brought them here to the university to do that. And then we had a core group of 5 that actually attended the KCS principles training with HDI as well. And then in April of 2018 is when we actually started our project. We broke down our KCS roadmap, how we were going to do KCS, and then we broke down into smaller focused teams for those specific areas. Our first actual pilot for doing KCS started in July of 2018. We did obviously discover, when you do pilots, you discover there are things that need to change. So we did make a few changes, and then we did our second revised pilot in September of 2018. And then we started our first wave in October, so our first official group of people in KCS in that wave. We didn't, again, move any of that legacy data. We did that just in time, not just in case. And then we also started our second wave in November. We started that way too soon. We had set up exit criteria, but got really excited. We wanted to get everybody in there. So when you set up exit criteria, kind of a key there is to follow that. So we kind of stepped back and allowed things to mature as they should have. And although we've finished our project now in 2020, we've realized KCS is kind of a never-ending project. It is the way that we work now, so it's never done. Some of the key accomplishments I'd like to point out is we did onboard academic advising, admissions, so other areas on campus, business office, financial aid, so those areas we brought in. We launched publicly in September of 2019 with our website, which is actually Coyote One Stop. And everything that was done before then was actually just internal, visible only to ITS and our outsource partner. So until we launched publicly, customers weren't actually able to see anything. And while we're the only ones that are actually officially doing KCS in the university, we do have other areas in the knowledge base. They provide us the content, and we put it into our content standard and put it into the knowledge base. We did finish our final wave in February of this year. And now we're working kind of to develop our second process, like for our KDEs.
So I'm curious, you touched on a couple things that I'd like to dig into a little bit deeper. You mentioned that you do use an outsourced partner for some of your support or operations. How has KCS helped you in that area?
It's actually helped tremendously because we have the same knowledge that we're using. They can see all of our, we have both customer facing and ITS internal knowledge. So our outsourced partner can actually see that ITS internal knowledge, and anything that's determined that the service desk can do, they can also do. So it's opened up more things that they're able to do for us without having to escalate those things up to the next level.
Gotcha. And do they also contribute back to the knowledge base as well? Are they contributors?
They actually don't create knowledge, but they are able to provide feedback on our knowledge base.
Okay, excellent. Good to know. So Kaylee, I'd like to hear from you, just for people who aren't familiar with KCS, can you give us a brief overview of how it's different from other knowledge management strategies and approaches?
Yeah, absolutely. So KCS is, focused on increasing efficiency of capturing knowledge and then managing it. It strives to be that integral part of your day-to-day operations, which is really where that's a key differentiator, where knowledge becomes the center of your organization. And then that branches out into your everyday operations itself. And KCS allows you to create knowledge as a byproduct of problem solving. So it's not that, it's that, Paula just said it, it's that just in time, not just in case. And so you're really creating the knowledge that's needed as you're going through that typical problem solving process.
Excellent. And we have a question from the audience, and I'll also remind the audience you can ask questions at any time using the Q&A tab on your BrightTalk window. We'd love to hear from you and make this an interactive discussion. For the University of South Dakota, do you require your outsourcer to be HDI certified?
We do not.
Okay. But they're also not contributing knowledge, so that kind of determines their level of involvement with that process. Yep. Good to know. So Kaylee, I'm curious, knowledge management isn't exclusively a technology problem, but technology is crucial to having a successful program. So what parts does technology do well? And then what should our audience be keeping in mind that they'll have to do for themselves?
Yeah, absolutely. So, while KCS is definitely enabled by technology, KCS is primarily about people. And so people are the source of the knowledge, and KCS has proven that the best people to capture and maintain that support knowledge are the people who create it and use it every day. So when you take that concept at its core, the technology that you use to do that needs to support your people. So your technology needs to make it easy to find it. It needs to make it easy to create it. It needs to make it easy to share it. And every piece of the platform that you use, in my opinion, should really be integrated with your support systems. So for example, if you take a service desk, you're really looking for that ease of use. So if I am a frontline technician and I'm speaking to an end user and I'm looking at, let's say, a new ticket creation window, you want to make sure that that technician is easily able to access that knowledge. And then on the flip side, when you're thinking about that user, right, they're a person, they have search needs and able to find that. So finding technology that can search that. And then with that in mind, having the best technology and system to do that is all great, but it takes the people behind that to run that. So something that's easy to administer, and something that you have, something to keep in mind is the fact that it's a living, breathing thing. It's a constant changing, it's a constant evolving platform. So something that also allows you to easily keep that updated, because that's what technology is not good at. Right? It's not good at going in there and knowing, oh, this software has updated. We might need to go and update this step or what it's called. It's the people behind it that need to go do that. So you can have all the best tools in place, but technology can't be that person. So let the technology empower the people and then get the best people behind it.
Excellent explanation. So Katerina, I'm curious, when you first started launching this project, tell us how you got people on board. How did you explain this idea? Because some of the concepts of KCS aren't necessarily obvious if you say, I'm going to go do knowledge management.
Right. It was really important for us to focus on, obviously we had everyone trained so that, they had that background information, but just getting someone, they had that HDI training. But just having people trained doesn't mean they're going to accept it. You've got your skeptics. And so, we had our project team and we had our whole marketing campaign and communications campaign thought out. We said, okay, what are some things the skeptics can throw at us? Let's prepare for that. So, we prepared those answers. And then we wanted to prepare really what's in it for me, for each group, So, we had that lined up. And then we also developed elevator pitches for, the managers, for the team members, every level that we had. And then once we had all those elements, we went out there and, did our marketing campaign. And that consisted of, we had posters. You've got to reach everybody and not everything will speak to everyone. So you have your posters, you have your Yammer updates. That's our social media platform where, we had different people posting, not just management, but, our team members were from really all levels. And that was really important because we wanted to show that everybody is on board. So we had the team members, their colleagues posting the benefits. What are the benefits? Why are we doing this? What can we win by this? And then, just because we are IT, we're very competitive. We develop games, and that we, initially we thought, oh, are they going to really, how are they going to react to the games? But they loved it. So we had games where we were having them look for rocks with benefits on them and posting that. And, it was a lot of fun. There were a lot of different things. And the idea really was, let's get these people talking. Because one of the problems in IT is we're all holed up in our different areas across campus, very siloed. Let's get these people talking together and doing things together. So, we took groups from that were maybe way across campus, put them together in a group, and they had to go against another group, or, maybe groups that had a little bit of friction. Let them get to know each other, and that was really beneficial, and people really got into it. So it was very interesting. It was really an opportunity to break down barriers, and we've really seen that with KCS also with the knowledge itself, and they see the benefits.
Now, one thing that I was really interested to hear about is that you have a lot of other groups across your university using KCS in some capacity to help serve customers better. We have an audience question. Where in your respective organizations do the knowledge managers reside within the organization structure? Are they part of the service desk? Do you have people who are responsible for that knowledge maybe in other areas of the organization as well? Tell us a little bit more about that.
So as far as knowledge managers or knowledge management right now, mainly it is in IT. When we onboard the other areas, they provide us the information that they would like to get put into the knowledge base. We provide them a template basically that they can fill out with that knowledge. And then we help them structure it so that it is in our style guide. So when we brought on most of the other departments, we have one specific person that we work with in each area to do that.
And Kaylee, kind of following up on another audience question here, can you tell us a little bit more about the difference between just-in-time and just-in-case knowledge concept? And then if you have a completely new system that's being rolled out, how do you kind of prepare for that if you're not creating the just in case knowledge?
Mhm. That's a really great question. So just to kind of highlight that just in case and just in time. So just in time is you are, let's say, receiving a phone call, you're talking to a customer, you're assisting them. And in that situation, if you don't already have knowledge that exists, because the first thing to do in KCS is to search and to try to find that knowledge. But if it doesn't exist, that's when you start that process of creating it. And that can be as simple as just capturing that in your support system. So maybe capturing that into a ticket. And you're capturing that based on the demand of the customer that they needed that. The just in case is kind of like that scenario you mentioned. So you have a new system that you're going to be rolling out, and you want to make sure that they understand all of the FAQs, frequently asked questions, the things that they need to know. Well, when you're thinking about KCS, you really can adapt the idea of that reactive nature versus the proactive. Because what you don't want to do is waste time assuming what your customers are going to ask. And also, when you do that, you assume how they're going to use the software. So my best advice, and what I've actually done historically when it comes to us rolling out a new system, is to pilot that. You're already going through your IT personnel who are going to be using it for the first time. You might even bring on some of your customers that are frequent flyers that you trust to kind of provide feedback. When they start using that, that's when you capture it. So when your internal IT employees are starting to use that system, capture their questions. If there are specific things of how do I log in, or how do I get to this, sit down and think about it. Is it something that's absolutely 100% going to be asked, or is it something that you're just assuming, just in case? So you can kind of mirror both of those, but pay attention to what you're in, because we're all our own internal customers. So pay attention to what your coworkers are asking and what your team is asking. Be capturing that knowledge as if you were an external customer.
Yeah, I'd like to iterate that we do the same, with the projects. We've got people testing in the project. So what are some of the frequent questions that come up? Let's get that in there. And, that's part of our documentation, putting some information in there.
And I can even say that from my own perspective, one thing that KCS is really specific about is that your articles should be written in your customer's knowledge and your tone of voice so that it is usable to someone. And the types of questions that you may think of proactively, if you're trying to say, what are people going to ask, instead of what they're actually asking, that mismatch can make it hard for your agents to find, or your support analysts to find that knowledge. It can also make it hard if you eventually want to use this to enable self-service. It makes it hard for customers to find that because you're not phrasing it the way a customer encounters that problem. We have another audience question, and Katerina, I bet that this is right up your alley. Is KCS more of an organizational culture, a way of life rather than a process? And what are the metrics that you can use to measure success following the adoption? So how did you know if you were making headway?
Sure. Yeah, it is a cultural change. It's definitely a cultural change, because before you were being promoted basically. Oh, I'm that expert who knows that thing. And here, with KCS, it's not what you know, it's what you share. So that's some people have a difficulty with that, and that's why you have to go through that whole cultural change. And as looking as, okay, how do we measure success? We went through, and this was the nice thing, when we had done the training with HDI, we received a roadmap that kind of gave us some ideas. What are some metrics that you would like to do? And for us, we were trying to say, okay, when we have a wave meaning, we maybe take a certain number of people and we train them, and then we don't throw everyone in at once. We don't have enough coaches for that. So when we have a wave, we want to make sure before we start with the next wave that they reach 80% proficiency in their article quality index. So, our coaches are going and measuring their article quality index. There's, and that's all listed out in these materials, which you can find if you Google. If you Google KCS, there are a lot of materials out there from the consortium that are free as well. So those are things that we look at to measure, the success. And one of the other things that we've been able to measure over time is, how much time has that saved us, right? So we have found within the first year, we were able to reduce the amount of time that we spent on tickets nearly 20%. And that's quite a substantial amount of time that we can then turn around and use in other areas. We have enough projects or maintenance or other things that are not maybe ticket attributed training where we can really move the dial for our organization.
That's awesome. So I want to pivot just a little bit. We've kind of covered the background, and now I want to bring it into the present. We've had a lot of disruptions in 2020 so far, and they're definitely impacting how we deliver support. Paula, I'm curious, what role has KCS played in your response to all of these disruptions? I know that you are just now back in the office recently. And how has it affected how you respond to other rapid changes?
So some of the impacts that we've actually seen, like to our service desk, technicians had to learn to work remotely while they were also supporting staff that was learning to work remotely. So the speed and replying and those changes actually increased. They were forced to rapidly build kind of their functional home offices, at the same time while we were doing all of this stuff in the support tool. It also increased focus on things like our networking and the associated applications that our customers were using, allowing those things to be done from home. So some of the services became also harder to deliver, like repairing and desk side support, those types of things. KCS did enable us to actually jumpstart kind of our newer agents also. We have student workers that come in, so they were able to jump into the knowledge base and be able to answer a lot of questions very quickly, which was a big help to getting those new people onboarded. It enabled our outsource vendor also to keep current on any of those emergency procedures that we had to implement for COVID. As far as KCS roles, I would say that the knowledge base was invaluable in providing kind of a standard way to deliver that service. Our initial impact with COVID-19, our hits in the knowledge base went up. KCS was helpful in that we were allowed to update things kind of as things were coming in, so that existing knowledge was updated, and then we were able to create new knowledge as we learned kind of how to support those new remote work processes. We also launched a COVID-19 section in our knowledge base, and we set up a COVID-19 student frequently asked questions section, again, with that just-in-time concept in mind. We created reference articles also that were kind of, we put those out more on a main page that said, if you're working remotely, look at this article, and it's going to have links off to all the other articles that you might need. So that reference articles were also then used to send out in communications to like faculty. It's like, if you're setting up to work remotely, reference this working remotely article that links off to maybe 10 or 12 other articles that are the different steps that you might need to do. But it gave them steps that they would need to follow. So KCS also allowed us to modify those procedures quickly, communicate those procedures. One big example, we modified our VPN and remote VDI access articles because everybody thought that they had to use VPN to connect to everything on campus, which was kind of bogging down our VPN service. So we were able to update that article pretty quickly and say, okay, you only need to use this service when you're accessing these applications, and then send that communication out very quickly, and then change and update those articles kind of on the fly.
I bet that made a big difference, especially as everyone's just learning how to access all these things away from the office for the first time.
Right. And it helped as we were learning it, we were able to get it communicated. So I think as we learned, we were able to push it directly to the customers.
That's awesome. That is so fantastic. So Kaylee, I'm curious, from an industry level, you work with lots of customers, lots of different industries on all sorts of different projects. What trends have you seen over the past 3 to 4 months of the support centers that are adapting particularly well? Do any key characteristics stand out to you?
Yeah, that's a really great question. So, like you said, Team Dynamics, we work with hundreds of customers, and that's across all different sectors, from financial services to education, to government, to healthcare, food and beverage, you name it. And every sector has a few things in common. And that right now is that most IT groups are completely overwhelmed. And so we just ran a market study with 166 participants across our private and public sector. And we saw a few things that jump out from this. And one was that overall, 38% were fully ready with a portal. So an end user portal that those customers can go to submit requests and to search knowledge. And that definitely impacted the drain that those IT teams felt. And so we also dug in a bit more to the knowledge base itself, and only 47% felt that they had their content in order. So that left 53% without the right materials to leverage when it comes to, like Paula just perfectly described, individuals who have never worked from home probably before, who are then now supporting individuals who have never probably worked from home before. So for those teams that are successful, what I've heard from them, and Team Dynamics just recently held their user summit. We do an annual user summit. And we held it virtual this year for the first time. And so I got to hear from a lot of our customers like Paula and Katarina, and the things that are making them successful, the ones that aren't feeling the drain as much, are heavily relying on their easy to use portals. And they're heavily relying on leveraging knowledge to provide that just-in-time information. So like Paula said, there was another customer that I was talking to that had a very, very similar situation, Paula, where they were having issues with their end users understanding, one, what a VPN is, because the majority of their customers never even had to use that because they were on their campus with a wired connection. And so when they were communicating out by email, sending out those massive wide customer emails to, let's say, for example, in higher ed faculty or to staff, they would send those instructions written right on into the email. And the problem with that is, as you all know, 2 seconds later, those instructions will change. And so then you have to send out an updated email. And then what you create is people just stop listening and reading your emails because it's never going to be right the first time. And so what I was hearing was success stories of users in those situations that were pointing and saying, hey, if you have any questions about the VPN, go here, go to our knowledge base. And anytime they go there, that information is going to be the most current to what is the most vetted and validated knowledge. And so the teams that are really utilizing their self-service tools are the ones that I'm hearing are feeling less of that drain right now, as we're just in this crazy, crazy time.
So I have 2 questions from the audience here, and I'd like to thank our audience for submitting those questions. Keep them coming. Click on that Q&A tab in your Bright Talk window. I've got 2 that are kind of related, and Kaylee, I think you can explain these a little bit better. What are you using to practice your KCS? Is it a ticketing system, or is it something that's related? Is it a separate system? What does that typically look like? And then when employees are working remotely, what is kind of a typical process for making articles available off the network? Do most people have them restricted to where it's sometimes on site, or is it in a public cloud somewhere?
Okay, so can you reiterate the very first part of that first question again for me?
Sure. So what system does KCS kind of live in? Is it in a ticketing system? Is it a separate function? Is it a special software that you have to have?
So there's a lot of different ways that you can implement KCS. And I saw a similar question about this is, does it have to be in the same system? Where does it live? And to be quite honest, it needs to live across all of the systems that you use to provide support. So if you are maintaining a ticketing solution in order to track all of your work and create your records, if that is your main source for that for your support technicians, then your knowledge base needs to be as integrated as possible for, again, going back to what we talked about earlier, that ease of access. Your adoption from your technicians and from your organization to really take KCS and make it an organization around knowledge, it needs to be as easy as possible. So yes, you're going to have your system that's going to house your knowledge base, and you're going to have your ticketing solution, and you're going to have your people. The KCS isn't just a process. It's that idea that your organization is centered around that knowledge. So the ways that you can do that in the easiest fashion is where KCS lives. The second part of that question, can you repeat that second part there?
Sure. So the second part of the question was, how do you make articles available, or even generally a portal available off the network, and what are kind of the typical practices for that?
Yeah. So I know in my past life as a knowledge coordinator, I started out many years ago under the typical mentality of, unless my customer signs in, they don't get to see it. And it was almost like there was this, I don't even know why I had this mental barrier, but I know that I've shared that sentiment, and a lot of other KCS individuals have said that too. They're like, oh my God, I felt the same way. And then the more that I realized that the easier knowledge is accessible, obviously it makes sense, the more that your customers are going to use that. So when it comes to making that available off the network, make sure that you have a platform that can do that. I'm sure Paula and Katarina can speak to this. So specifically, for example, with Team Dynamics, you have the ability to have a knowledge article internal. So you can only view that when you have signed in. And then you also have the ability to say, you know what, anyone with the URL to this article can access it and see that information up to date. And I'm curious, Paula, are you using kind of a mixture of you have to authenticate and then you have to, you can see things public?
We are. Most of our articles are going to be public for everybody to be able to see, because we want students, prospective students, parents, anybody interested in a question for USD, we want to be able to access the knowledge. Most of the time when you have to log in to see knowledge is when you're submitting a request, and it maybe be a specific request around a service. Say, I need access to this tool. Then we would prompt them to log in to be able to request that access. We also allow them to submit tickets without logging in. So they can put in their personal email address to submit tickets. We do ask if they are a student or faculty staff that they put their USD email account in there, so that then it automatically creates the ticket with their Team Dynamics or USD account. But we allow both ways.
I just want to mention we have just as many, if not more, articles that are internal, right? So, we as IT and also other areas have the ability to set in Team Dynamics certain sections as being internal. So we, you'll see, and if anyone's, a lot of the questions you can probably answer by Googling afterwards for Coyote One Stop and just taking a look at how our knowledge base is set up. But you'll see a lot of times it'll link off IT only, and you won't have access to that. And that's where we're in the system. And there, it doesn't make a difference if I'm on campus or off campus. It's a cloud system, and I have to, sign it into it. And we have two-factor authentication as well.
Awesome. So I am curious, another question for you, Katarina. Our audience asked a question about, we're in interesting economic conditions right now. How does the cost of training balance with the benefits? And if you have limited training funding, who should you train and on what? How did you approach that when you were starting this project?
Well, really what we did is, being project management, we did a business case first to see, what, and I would suggest that for anyone going forward, at the time, what does it cost to train everyone? And maybe you don't have the budget to do that, but then it's important for you to train at least, several people in your team so that they are able to train others. But I really would suggest giving everyone that training. It's definitely worth it, because you're not going to see those return on investment if you don't invest in training. So I think really we were thinking, oh, should we do it that way? And we realized, no, training is going to make such a big difference to where we're at. And so when we looked, we already had a system that could do KCS, or we could make, we had Team Dynamics, so we could change things so that we were able to do KCS. So, those costs weren't there. But when you go back and you look at the return on investment, we are just, even the conservative level, we're saving over $500,000 a year in time that we can turn around and spend on other things. So I think really it's not whether I can invest, it's when, because you're losing out on investment if you're not doing it.
$500,000 a year in time savings.
You have to realize we're only 66 people. So, we're a small team. So, some of your customers might be bigger customers. That can really change. And so when we originally did our business case, we calculated 30%. It turned out in the first year, 20%. So I went back and did the calculation again to see, but still we're way ahead of, with this method. And there are a lot of things that you can't calculate. Quality of the answers. You're giving that customer the same answer each time. You have a quality of answer. Someone leaves us in 2 weeks. Well, their knowledge is there. I don't have to turn around and look for, where did they keep that knowledge? So those are things that I can't really measure in those calculations, but really they add to the picture. So in that case, I would really encourage everyone to look into it and, look over a 5-year period.
Awesome. So kind of on that note, you mentioned what happens, and we've talked a little bit about the onboarding process, and you mentioned what happens if people leave with their knowledge. One of our audience questions was, how do you encourage the knowledge hoarders to give up their knowledge? And Paula, this might be a good question for you.
That was something Katarina kind of touched on earlier too. We really kind of developed those communication plans, kind of letting them know it's like, and it's kind of changing their mindset that you're not valuable for what you know or what you have in your mind. You're valuable for what you share. That was really kind of the focus that we had taken on it. You're valuable, and we used a recognition program throughout the first couple years that we did this, so that we recognized who had the knowledge article that was linked to the most tickets. Just to say, hey, this knowledge article was linked this many times this month. Congratulations. And we had mugs that we gave out, and we had a traveling trophy that we had of a golden hard drive that we put people's names on, just to kind of, say, hey, this is the behavior that we want. This is what we're looking for.
I love that.
Yeah. And that what's in it for me, that hoarder, how many times does that hoarder get interrupted each day and asked, how do I do this? How do I do that? Well, just imagine you're not going to get those 10 questions every day. And now you can concentrate on your own work. And, wouldn't it be great if somebody can take over some of those things for those? That's a pretty nice thing to, be able to say.
Yeah, I remember specifically having that exact conversation with a third level individual I was trying to get buy-in. How many times have I had to come to your desk and ask this question, and then times that by everybody else that works here? And wouldn't you like to take that skill set that's so valuable and unique and use that to projects and other ways to help the organization, and reframing it to really find what motivates that person? It's that they're valuable outside of the knowledge that they hoard, that they have to be asked every time.
I really love that summary that you were using earlier, that you're not valuable for what you know, you're valuable for what you share. We need to put that on a t-shirt. That would be awesome. So Katarina, I'm curious, how has KCS affected your new hire onboarding process, and does it have impact on your employee satisfaction long-term?
Yes. So, when our new hires come in, right now with KCS being there, with the knowledge being there, within a week, they're already productive and able to take tickets. Previously, that was not the case because, we'd have to train them, they're not going to be able to do everything, but they're able to do quite a bit. And, I know it's often quite frustrating for employees to have to wait for someone to get knowledge. Well, here they have the ability to just go in and look at that knowledge. So that has been really helpful, on the onboarding process. And as far as our long-term employees, they're very happy about it too, because they don't have to go look at 3 different places to find that information. There's really one place that they go, and maybe it links off to another place that could be, but there's one area that they go to look for that information. So that's been a real benefit. And we've heard that time and time again from long-term employees. And we had some skeptics who really turned around and were, some of our biggest promoters of KCS. So I it's just a matter of talking about those points, getting that out there, but it's been really beneficial to the entire team.
Excellent. So we've had several audience questions on the topics of metrics and reporting. Kaylee, I know that you are a big fan of reports. What kind of insights can managers learn from KCS reporting? What are things that in your previous life you really like to look at?
Yeah, so obviously the normal things we think about, right? So ticket deflection, looking at how many of your users actually are able to resolve their issues from that. If you have a high search rate, well, then clearly you're getting more buy-in from your customers. And I think we all are decently aware about that customer metrics. But what I think is important, especially for those groups and team members that are listening right now, in the beginning of your KCS journey, it's to pay attention to all of those metrics that you can measure internally. And that's really where I think sometimes the focus is lost a little bit. And when you start focusing on those internal metrics, and Paula and Katarina have mentioned several of those, that's really where you can start to kind of steer the ship and see where you need to go. And so for those metrics, one of the best ones that you can measure is how many of your tickets that are being closed by your support technicians are being associated to knowledge. And then when you're looking at that, you're also looking at what is the knowledge that's being associated. What are the things that people are asking? And when you're looking at the types of knowledge that you're having to provide, are there things that you could be doing differently in your systems and in your support that you could be changing to even stop those types of questions? Because a lot of the times the searches that you see within your tool from your customers and your internal support system individuals will give you the first look into your ongoing problems. They can help you identify what are the ongoing things. And then when it comes to kind of gamifying that system, because I did see a couple questions about that, and I know that Katarina and Paula mentioned that it's to be careful with gamifying, but it's such a powerful tool, right? So the right metrics to do for that are how many times has your knowledge helped someone make their job easier, right? So that is such a powerful almost recognition to get, right? It's like, wow, I wrote this article that took me 5 minutes to do, and 600 times has a support technician answered the phone or answered a chat and been able to quickly provide that. The wrong metric would be who's created the most articles. Because you're going to get a lot of articles that are going to have very bad content because people can churn out those articles just fine, but what's the quality of that? So, obviously consider your external metrics, and those are kind of your standards when you start looking into KCS, ticket deflection and your search, how many times people are searching, but look at those internal metrics as well and help that kind of steer your ship when it comes to where you need to be improving in your implementation and your ongoing KCS process.
And Katarina, so I'm curious, we talked a little bit about the employee side, but how has KCS affected your customers? Does it do anything for them, even if they still contact you through an analyst-assisted channel? And then I'm also seeing a lot of questions of how do you get people to adopt kind of searching for their own knowledge?
Yeah, so the university departments, when they're sending out communications, they're sending links to services or articles so that we have that timely fashion, and that helps us a lot because those are where a lot of times they're looking at those links and then maybe not calling us. We as IT, we have social media posts where we might post something about a different system, or we have a problem that could reduce the number of calls. But we also have our agents sending links to articles either out of Team Dynamics, which is our ticketing system, as well as knowledge-based system. The customers get those by email. And we have to be honest, the younger generation, and we have a lot of students here, they like to search first. So they're able to, look in the knowledge base first, and they might like to search before they even speak with us. And then, we try to really make it as simple as possible. We link to the knowledge base from our USD Go University app for mobile devices, from our website, from our portal. But we have to meet the customer where they are. Some will want to speak with us and call us. That's fine. But others are going to prefer those other methods of communication. And we're allowing them to do this with multiple channels, the omni-channel type of method. And I think there was a second part to the question.
Yeah. So the second part is what do customers, or how do they benefit even if they contact you through an analyst assisted channel? So if they call and talk to a person, how does KCS support that?
Well, and we're finding those answers a lot faster. So a third of our inquiries we're able to close within an hour. We're able to get those answers. So quickly for those customers. And we don't have to maybe bounce it to second level support. So we found now that we've gotten that knowledge base there, we've looked at processes and said, well, this is silly. Why are we moving it to second level? This is something that, a service desk can do. So that, that's really helped us with our processes as well. So the customer is getting a benefit in that way. And I think, once we get that information in there, the turnaround is much faster.
That's awesome. So you touched on something that I really want to dive into here. A knowledge base and a service catalog are different, but they do kind of work together. Kaylee, can you tell us a little bit more about the relationship between them and maybe how some people are using both of them together to get a better result?
Absolutely. So obviously they stand alone in probably your maintenance practice and the way that you structure them. And you will have knowledge-based articles on just about anything, but you only provide a limited amount of services, right? So your knowledge base is going to span a ton of extra knowledge that isn't going to necessarily be a service that you might house within your service catalog. So you must think about those differently. But even though at their core, they obviously serve different functions, they need to be married. The best way to think about that is they're holding hands, right? And then they're helping each other along the way. So when you have your customers that you're trying to encourage to adopt self-service, obviously you want them first and foremost to be able to search to find the answer and solve it themselves. Everybody in this scenario wants that to happen first. Your customer wants it, you want it because you don't want to have to deal with that. But if that doesn't happen, where do you want them to go? You don't want them necessarily to pick up the phone. You don't want them to necessarily have to chat in. You want to cause that ticket deflection as much as possible and speed up that first contact resolution. So have them submit a ticket or inquiry through your self-service catalog. Have a means to do that. And Paula and Katerina have mentioned the ways that they're sort of alleviating the barriers behind doing that and making it easy. So that's obviously something to keep in mind. So when you think about this idea of this push of self-service culture, they need to be, in my opinion, in the same system. They need to be right there, married together. You don't want to tell your customer, first, go to this website and search. If you can't find it, I'm so sorry, you're going to have to go over here. And it almost feels like when you get directed to a million different offices and you're just trying to find the right place. And think about not just how easy it is to search in the platform that you choose or that you have, but how easy is it to find organically? And so, Katerina, you hit on this perfectly just a moment ago, and I'll tie that into why it's important when you think about the marriage between service catalog and knowledge base, is that organically, your customers need to find that by the ways that they do that. And what you all do right now is the first time you need something, what do? You Google it. Right? You go to Google and you might type in South Dakota VPN issue, right? And then you want the organic ways that they search to also find it. So make sure that that organic functionality can funnel that into first your knowledge base, your portal, and then right on into that self-service service catalog.
Great answer. So Katerina, I want to talk a little bit more about the challenges. We've had a lot of budget related questions. All this is well and good, but what's the catch? Is there a huge price tag that comes with implementing KCS? Money's especially tight for a lot of organizations right now. So is what we're talking about achievable today?
I think so. The catch that we have is, initially your average handling time is going to go up because your people, first level, second level, third level support, they're writing the articles, right? But that's going to turn around in the mid to long term. And your average handling time, it may be higher also because now the simple services or the simple requests that you got, the customer is able to do that themselves. And now you're focusing on those more complex issues. So we didn't want to really look at the average handling time, but we looked at the overall time we spent on tickets and saw that 20% reduction. So it's a change. That's really one of the catches. But as I said, in the beginning, it's going to take a little bit more time, but the benefits come out afterwards, when you're first getting that information in there, because that does take time.
Now, I'm curious, you touched on something really interesting there, is that you saw your average handle time increase. During this process, did you look at the actual talk time versus after call work? Because the articles would be written after the call. So did you separate those out to kind of keep tabs on it?
Yeah, so we don't have the ability to do that in our system, and we're not doing our second level support. We don't have that. So I think other companies that have that Avaya or whatever system they're using would be able to see that, but for us, we did not have that ability.
Okay, well, I was just curious about that. So, Kaylee, I'm curious if you can tell us, we've had a lot of questions about style guides, and obviously anytime that we put all of this work into a portal, we want people to use it. How do you make sure that when you create these articles and you're providing this information, that actually makes sense to the people who really need it the most?
So it's going to be very simple. Write it in the context of your customer. So stop determining the language that they are going to use or will use. Write what they write. A great example is a small story. So we were implementing KCS methodology at the university that I used to work at, WKU, and we were bringing on a separate third level group that was going to start creating knowledge content based on tickets they got about the system they supported, an AV system. And in this system, they had what are called modules. And they were getting a lot of questions around these modules, but the customers were not once calling them modules, they were calling them widgets. And this individual was like, but I'm not going to write a knowledge-based article and call it a widget. It's not what it is. It's a module. And I'm like, that's great. We know it's a module. That's great. That's all that matters. But when it comes to the customer, they're never going to find this content because they're going to be using their language. So when you're writing this out, use the language of your customer, even if it feels wrong from an IT perspective, because at the end of the day, that doesn't matter. And then when it comes to your style guide, you're going to be pleased with this. Keep it simple. Follow what the consortium tells you to. Very, very simple. Keep it consistent. And I know South Dakota and their knowledge base, if you, like Katarina said, you can Google it, you can find it. They keep a very simple, consistent format to it that you absolutely can look at and see. But if less is more.
And we use the concept that we use also when we're writing our resolutions is complete thoughts, not complete sentences.
Yep.
Click on this, do this. I mean, it's a complete thought. Don't write it out in sentences. You don't need that many words to do the action.
Because the customers, you don't want to throw a huge piece of paper, like all the words at the customer. The less is more. It's less stressful for the customer.
Great advice. So we only have a couple minutes left, and I just want to reassure our audience, if you've asked any questions that we weren't able to get to just yet, we will try to follow up in some way after the event or provide some additional resources to you. So I want to wrap everything up with just kind of an overall, hopefully our audience is feeling inspired. From each of you, what is something that you know now that you wish you knew earlier in your KCS journey? Paula, I'll start with you.
I think realizing the amount of time that it takes for our coaches in the beginning, the waves take longer because of the time that they're taking to coach people to get them up to date on KCS, but it is definitely time well spent. Don't get too eager to add more people in, kind of like what I touched on in the beginning where we jumped ahead. And then the other thing that we did was an article quality index tool. Because our coaches were actually using Excel sheets where we were manually running reports and manually copying and pasting things over. If you have something like an article quality index, it saves coaches a tremendous amount of time.
Awesome. Katarina, any thoughts, things that you wish that you knew when you started?
Yeah, so in addition to what Paula said, which I would, I'm really behind that as well. Just thinking about, I wish I had known how important this what's in it for me is, right? So we had gone over that. It's really important to reiterate that if you did the training, a couple months ago, and now you're putting the person into the wave now, reiterate those things so that they realize where they're at. And, another thing that we noticed is for our new employees who didn't go through this whole process of the marketing and the communications campaign, they really were at a disadvantage because they didn't get that. We train on that a little bit, but we didn't go in as much in depth. So that was something that we had to, pivot and make sure we got that information out there.
All right, Kaylee, wrap it up for us.
Yeah, and to kind of echo that with Katerina, the training. So when I first attempted to build a knowledge base, I'd lightly heard about KCS, and I went out and all the wrong ways tried to implement one, in all the wrong ways. And we don't have enough time to even begin to dive into all the wrong ways. And then I remember with my small team going through the online HDI fundamentals, or the KCS fundamentals training. And it was a nice online course that only took like a few hours to do. And I remember my small team and I in this little small meeting room after we each completed our training, looking at each other and going, wow, we were doing literally everything wrong. And so the biggest thing that I can stress is, especially with budgetary constraints, train your core team with certified KCS training material. And then once you get your champions of KCS, train the trainer concept. So then begin to train others before you start diving in and trying to implement a system or, moving forward with the organization on it.
Thank you so much. That is all we have time for today. I'd like to thank our panelists from the University of South Dakota and our sponsor, Team Dynamics. And thank you to everyone in the audience. We had such a great audience with wonderful questions. So thank you for participating in today's discussion. This webcast is copyright 2020 by Informatech. The presentation materials are owned by or copyrighted by HDI, which is solely responsible for its content. Individual speakers are solely responsible for their content and their opinions. Have a great day, and I hope that you'll join us again soon.